So there's been some new controversy regarding the new auto farming thing. Well, auto farming in quotes. T90 has a very strong opinion on it. I saw him on Twitter initially not being too happy about it. And now he has made a video where he's talking about the whole topic. 21 minutes long, so buckle in. I'm going to listen in and we'll share our thoughts and our opinion. Let's see.
Age of Empires 2 is the greatest game ever.
True.
I'm obsessed with this game, as are you if you're watching.
True.
And I want what's best for Age of Empires 2 as a community and thus a game. Now, even though this game has been around for 20 plus years, Age of Empires 2 really had its boom right before the 2019 Definitive Edition. The community was booming again prior to Definitive Edition, and when
I'm going to do 1.25 speed, just so it's a little bit faster.
The Definitive Edition hit, that is where the game really started to explode because there were so many great additions to our game and how you can play it, as well as new civilizations and new content. This, of course, was very new for people who had stayed around Age of Empires 2 because we were not used to having servers. We were not used to having some of these new quality of life features. But we were not used to having relatively consistent updates to the game, whether that be map changes or civ changes, or changes to the meta as certain things were adjusted, such as cost of walls or build time for buildings and walls too. All of these things that the Definitive Edition have brought us is fantastic. And while there have been some things over the years that I've disagreed with in terms of the additions, more often than not, the team we have, the changes that have come to our game have been fantastic for it. But this one that happened this week, it bothers me. And so let's talk about why. If I were to pick three things that I think are instrumental in Age of Empires 2, the three keys, the three things you need to focus on, it would be the following. The first one would be creating villagers all the time. The second one...
Why now? Stop disrupting the video, man. I'm trying to record for YouTube, okay? Sorry, YouTube.
...would be adding farms. And the third one would be creating military. Villagers cost food. Farms bring in the food long term. And then, of course, you have to make military because this is, after all, a war game. It's more complex than that. Obviously, there's other ways to get food in the game. But after your sheep are gone and after your boars are gone, it is all about farms.
He's referring to general macro economy management.
It's a bit different because it is all under the individual's control. There are players who place near perfect farms, even if the game expands over many hours. And there are people who tire and place farms that maybe are subpar and slightly inefficient compared to others.
That's a good edit.
It's ironic that I'm making this video, but the T90 farm has been a meme for years. It is something that I'd like to say I've improved on, but it's a struggle for me at times to focus on placing efficient farms. So what this feature is auto farm placement. Prior to this week, anytime you play Age of Empires 2, you would select your villagers, you'd maybe build your mill, and then you would place your farms. Now, you select your villagers, and you hover your mouse cursor over a mill or town center, and you just spam click. And the farms are placed immediately for you. Your mouse cursor never has to move, and they are placed very efficiently. Many people jokingly have said that I paid the devs to make this feature, that I did this to improve on my own weaknesses and finally make a push to become a pro in this game. But I hate it, and I want to talk about why. Okay, so you back up for a second. I want you to think about what really made you love Age of Empires.
I mean, first of all, the example we saw earlier, right? What did he say? Maybe 2 in-game seconds? The guy who made farm manually versus the guy who was like taking the vills and spam clicking. Of course, it depends on how quick you are as a player in general. But like for my own sake, I can only speak for myself naturally. I don't use auto farm unless I'm in mid-late castle age. And even then, I don't use auto farm often. It's a very rare inclusion in my mechanical approach to the game. And I only really use it in later games when like resources are starting to float or you're like switching a bunch of vills from one resource to another. So far, I find myself using it quite little.
For me, it was the history initially. The swords and arrows really excited me. But if I had to pick one thing, it would be like the depth of the game. And what I mean by that is how much an individual can control. You could play the same map, you could play the same civilization, but oftentimes you're going to have a different game because there's so many different directions your units can move. There's so many tiny little intricate details that can play out in any given game. Obviously, Age 2 is a lot of depth then because of all the different maps you can have and all the different civs and units. But if you just think about like a standard game, I think what keeps people getting tired of it is how many tiny details the user has to control. And that is, of course, a very complicated thing. To have to control everything, to have everything be a part of the user's input is tricky. But that's also why I feel this game has come back after 20 plus years and why people can't leave it, because they can't get tired of it. And because the users are controlling so many of these movements, there's always a little bit of differences, even if players are trying to achieve the same goal in any given game. And so right off the bat, I hate this feature because it eliminates player control. This is labeled as a quality of life feature, but when I compare that to other quality of life features, I feel like this is going a little too far.
I don't think this is any different than being able to shift queue villagers, then dropping a lumber camp on a woodline and the villagers go automatically to work. I think it's just a nice little bonus. Like those tedious tasks, in my opinion, I have no problem that they are somewhat automated. they're insignificant to the game, in my opinion, and it's insignificant to the fun you're having in the game. Do I have more or less fun now with auto farm? Honestly, it hasn't changed. But I don't think placing farms is a fun part of Age of Empires. It's just a necessary thing, right? Of course, if you're like a guy that plays SimCity and just want to build a pretty base, maybe that's different. But for me, it's like, I don't think farming is fun, and it shouldn't be something I need to spend hours and hours. Or like, that's obviously exaggerated. I don't think it's something that should be a part of my skill set to do that well, for example, right?
Shift queuing, for example, was something that was brought into Age 2 with DE, and that is a quality of life feature where it adds to the player's control and creativity. It is the player's choice on if they wish to shift queue their villagers to go to those next tasks. That adds something for the player. Being able to queue up technologies, which wasn't always the case, that adds the ability for the player to make a decision. When it comes to the farm edition here, I don't think that adds any creativity to the players. In fact, I think it takes away from possible creativity. Okay, so point one is it takes away.
Where's the creativity and choice of placing farms? Like, in my opinion, it's like, how does this have any significant impact on strategic decisions or creativity or anything?
Away from player decisions. But I want to move on to point two, which I think is the thing that is a bit trickier for people to understand. Okay, so many of you guys probably know this, but just to break it down, being an RTS game, you're always fighting to perform as many actions as you can within Age of Empires 2 within any given minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's referred to as APM, or actions per minute. And depending on the individual, you're going to have more or less APM. While APM isn't everything, it is very common for people who have a similar APM range to be matched in a similar skill set. And it makes sense, right? Because you only have so many actions you can perform a minute.
Well, that still plays with us.
Other players who could perform similar amounts of actions.
That's not really
why
true.
You're even and why you are matched the way you are. Now, Hardy's going to show some crappy pie chart on screen. And I wish we had actual data to maybe back this up, but the truth is it depends on the individual. What you're seeing is a 50-50 split of the pie chart of APM, meaning the frequency in which you're looking at your eco and making economic decisions, such as creating villagers, placing farms, relocating villagers, building mining camps, lumber camps, etc. And then the percentage of time that you may be producing military and then controlling military as well. Now, I don't think this is 50-50 in Age of Empires 2. Again, it depends on the individual. But the point I'm trying to make here is there is that back and forth of focus on economy versus military. And that has been the case since the start of Age of Empires 2 back in the late 90s. Now, this flow, this back and forth flow of the game is what really is beautiful about it. And something I really try and point out in my cast is sometimes you may have players who are evenly matched in rank, but it's pretty clear that they are different style players. So you may have an aggressive player who you could visibly see is focusing more on their military because of the forward army and the micro at play, up against a player who maybe isn't as aggressive with the military side and is opting to play more economically. So here you then see these charts flip, right? So you have a player here who's more aggressive. They're looking at their military 65% of the time, and then 35% of the time, they're focusing then on their economy. Obviously, the reverse applies to their opponent, where the economic focus is more so 65%, and then the military side is 35%.
That's not really how it works.
It creates this interesting dynamic where both players are at that level.
I understand what he wants to.
Reasons, and both players are at that level, but the weakness is the strength for the other. The strength is the weakness for the other, and it just produces.
I understand what he wants to point out here, but this is not really how it works, in my opinion.
It's a very interesting back and forth and a very interesting dynamic in the game. Now, what's possible there, right? How economic you could.
Like if you're playing defensive or passive, you might be spending way more time like placing walls, securing, looking around that you're not being attacked. So there's no guarantee or like average that you're spending more time looking on economy than an opponent who is trying to attack, right?
Be how aggressive you can be. That is all based on the framework that is Age of Empires 2. The way the game works, the rate at which resources come in the game, how long economies take to pay off, military unit damage output, all of those things, right? And while there are changes to civilizations at times, more often than not, the framework that is Age of Empires 2, that ebb and flow that's possible.
I have to be honest, I zoned out. Wait, what did he say? I was watching the fight. It was a really nice fight.
That ebb and flow that's possible, that has never been touched. That has always been the case. That is the framework for the game. And my worry is that this farm change completely changes that flow of the game. Okay, so initially when I found out about this feature, I messaged the very person who is editing this right now, Hardy. Hardy hadn't tried it yet. His elo is around 1,200, and I asked his opinion on what he thought about the feature.
Wow.
He said, generally, I disagree with you on the feature because I think it's great. Game needs to become easier for new players, and it won't matter at all for pros. Now, my response was, it will matter for pros, and it will blend every game into more of the same. However, I welcome your opinion. Please try it. And my goal, my ask of him was to try that back and forth multitasking, right? Because Hardy has a certain skill set, and he has that certain back and forth. So I wanted him to try going to military, going back and placing farms normally as he would, and then going to military, and then trying this new feature with adding the farms. And Hardy's response was, and we'll have to mute this, okay, actually, it's a ton faster. Now, this was just
Yeah.
one man's
Like that
opinion.
example there is very much faster, right? He's floating. Look at the resource,
So
right?
I wanted him to try going to
In this
military,
case,
going back and
he's
placing farms normally
floating.
as he
He's
would,
going to be floating
and
1,000
then
wood.
going to military, and then trying.
Like the jump there was not the actual flow of the game, right? In this case, he's floating 1,200 wood. And why is it a bad thing that you can do this?
This new feature with adding the farms.
My opinion is
and Hardy's
completely
response was,
fine.
and we'll have to mute this. Okay, actually, it's a ton faster.
It's obviously
Now, this
really
was just
fast compared to
one
what he
man's
would normally
opinion,
at his
right?
elo.
He's 1,200 elo, which I would say is the mid ranks, right? So at least with his initial take, it does have an impact on the mid ranks in terms of how the focus is. And so my concern is that players who are more economic, they may now struggle against more micro-oriented players, because those micro-oriented players, those attacky players who already weren't spending a high percentage of the time looking at their economies anyways, they now don't have to. So I tweeted about this.
But the eco-focused players will place farms faster themselves, and they can spend more time focusing on defending.
And there was someone who replied, actually, Hardy's exact rank, and said, wholeheartedly agree. As a 1,200 elo pleb who can't control an army to save my life, my eco management is often game winning. And that right there, that final line is what I've always loved about the game, is how the economic focused players who can't control armies as well always have a chance and always have an edge. And those micro nerds, those super aggressive players, if their micro's not working all the time, they will struggle a little bit more at home because they haven't focused on their eco. So without going on for too long here, and obviously there's plenty of examples of people who do like this feature, I'm really concerned that the ebb and flow, the back and forth that is Age of Empires 2 has been affected with this particular change.
I do understand what
by the way, that this is...
I do understand what he's trying to point out, though, and like what his... Like, I do understand what he means. It's not like where he's coming from makes no sense. Like, if it's no secret, I disagree with his overall take on this, as I have also answered to his tweet, and I said my opinion there as well. But I do understand where he's coming from and his concerns, and they are valid. I just personally think it's not as significant as he might think it is.
It's not something that's going to affect the pros, but will prop up the beginning style players. And I disagree. Like, I'm top 100, and this makes a big change for me, right? And it makes a big change for other people as well. And prior to making this video, there has been very few pro players who actually want this, because all of them do feel like that economic expansion should still be under the control of the player. There's a lot more that can be said on this. Quite honestly, there's so much feedback, both positive and negative, about this feature. I could continue, but I want to properly represent why I think this is poor direction for the game. And so I need to move on to the next item, which is setting precedent. So
I also have to say, look, he's saying he's a top 100 player, which, I mean, arguably. But like, he's saying he has a big impact for him. I am a top 100 player. Humbly, I have to admit. I would have to say it's very little impact on my play and my performance. The only difference is those messy late game scenarios where I float a bit of wood and I want to switch my, as I said earlier, like switch economy quickly, right? Then it's nice to have this feature, and I do things probably 1 or 2 seconds faster than I would normally. Is that significant enough where it changes the game or impacts the game in any way? I don't think so.
I think it's safe to say that this particular feature was added.
My point is, I don't think it's big, as he says. Of course, it has a little impact, but it's not big.
To help beginner players, to help people who struggle with what is a...
I also want to, sorry, I know I keep interrupting, but it's also not something that is, you're not using this feature all the time, right? It's not something that you're constantly doing every minute of the game. It's something that happens every couple of minutes, maybe at most. And at certain points in the game, you don't ever do it anymore. The amount of times this auto feature is used is also, in my opinion, quite low compared to like that it wouldn't have such an impact.
Was added to help beginner players, to help people who struggle with what is a difficult game, Age of Empires 2. Now, I continue to argue the fact that it's difficult is actually what makes it timeless, and I think it is really important that it remains difficult in many ways. But just look at what this farm feature has done. It has simplified a very important aspect of Age of Empires 2. At the start of this video, I said, or at least I think I did, that I feel there are 3 core things when you look at Age of Empires 2. It's creating villagers with consistency. It is expanding eco, or more generally here, farms. And then it is making military, right? These are...
In my opinion, expanding eco itself and like making farms is not, it's more about obviously making villagers, like you're saying, the general macro aspect of the game, but economy balance, it's so much more important than placing farms quickly or automatically producing villagers or like all this stuff. Balancing the economy and making strategic decisions in the game is so much more important. And if some of that stuff got automated, like it will automatically keep as many villas on wood for you as you need to produce this amount of units or make this amount of farms. Then we're going too far, right? Because then the game is automating the economy balance that enables you to do things in the game.
Are core things about the game. When you look at my cast with Capture Age, or any cast for that matter, a lot of the data is represented on screen. You've got the military count, you've got the worker count, which is the villagers, but then there's advanced stats on screen which show idle TC, as well as, of course, idle villagers. This meme right here, my favorite meme, it's the Loey the Legend meme. It kind of goes back to that back and forth flow that Age of Empires 2 typically has. You feel good about killing opponent villagers because that's a big part in affecting how many resources they bring in. But oh shoot, you forgot to look back at your own eco throughout that time. So now that there's auto farm, and the argument is Age of Empires 2 is difficult, we need to make this better for beginner players. We need to make this more approachable for people so they don't leave. What about auto queue on villagers? It doesn't actually seem that far off.
They have that in Age of
Automatically
Mythology.
placing 15 farms that quickly with just some clicks without having to move your mouse cursor at all is there. What if they added an option in the town center where your TC would consistently produce villagers as long as you, of course, had enough food to produce the villagers? I think most of you guys would be against that. At least I would hope so. But the point is like, there are very complex parts about this game just because the individual has to control everything. And if we're worried about people thinking the game is too hard and stopping, this sets some level of precedent where I think they could continue to make this game more autoplay and less controlled by the player. Listen, I get that people want to fight and enjoy the fights and make the units and all of that. And that is, I think, kind of what grabs us in initially before we realize how important economy is. But I think the build-up and how economy works is important for a player to have in this game. And is a very important thing competitively to have to master. And so I'm worried. I'm worried the direction the game is taking. And I'm not the only one. There are a lot of opinions that I won't share publicly because they were brought to me personally. But, to just go off of Twitter, for example, pro player Nikov voiced his opinion and said that he's not a big fan of the automatic farming. And I said, soon the game will auto-queue villagers as well. And he says the direction the game is heading is very clear and it seems unstoppable. Now,
I completely disagree with that. There is no indicator, and the devs have shown no indicator that they're going to automate important parts of this game. Guys, every single RTS game released today has so many more quality of life features than Age of Empires has. We have only gotten them retroactively, that's the word. I don't think there's any indicator that they're going to make any crucial thing in the game be automated, and to the point where automated feature in the game that's going to ruin the game or change the competitiveness or anything like that. I understand what they're thinking. Like, okay, now they made auto farm easier. There has been other changes that have made certain parts of the game easier. But like none of those changes are changes, in my opinion, that were the point of like, okay, the game now lost some competitive impact in terms of decision making, micro, macro, this or that, right? I feel like these it's like the doom and gloom thing, right? I think they're way too much into the negative and worry about this. I feel like it's way too negatively predicting the future of the game, right? Personally, I don't see any indicator of that.
We both care about the game. So many of us do, right? So it's very easy to maybe go a little bit too far and jump to conclusions. But guys, if this right here was doable 4 years ago through some type of mod, something that someone added in the mod center or something, if this right here was happening, everyone would have said it needed to be banned and that it was hacking or that it should never be a part of the game. And now it's an official feature. So I am very concerned that this is a sign of a direction that I'm not really on board with for the game I love. One final point from me, and then we're going to sum it up. And I think those of you that maybe aren't in full agreement with what I'm saying may like my sum up portion at the end here. Okay, so you might be like, well, T90, this feature doesn't have to be utilized, right? You don't have to do it. It is there for those that want to do it, which of course is great for them. But you could still place farms the same way you always have if you really wished, which is great. People then have options. My feeling is if you choose to not use it, you are then at a competitive disadvantage. If you can only perform X amount of actions per minute, and you, of course, are taking more time performing the same action your opponent is performing, you're then at a disadvantage, which then means that you're going to struggle a little bit more at that rank and maybe drop some rank. And
obviously, if you're
say, what changed?
Purposely avoiding using a quality of life feature, there's a big chance you will be at a disadvantage.
Oh, I guess I have to do this thing. I mean, we've seen this plenty of times before, even with like.
I will show you guys soon why I think also it's not that.
Everyone just starts to make monks themselves because I've just
I'll show you soon.
Competitive here. This feature is so good. It is so fast, and you do not need to think about it. You don't even need to use brain space like you do for normally placing farms. And I'm just worried that that's going to be the only way to farm. That if you look at someone's eco, it's just going to look the same as the other guy's eco. Uniqueness is so important to this game, guys. It is what at least keeps me here. The different ways to play it. But then if you look at our high-level scene, or you look at some of the mid-elo casts, you just have completely different preferences with how people choose to play the game. Little habits and little ticks, because it's endless possibilities and because everything is within the user's control. During Hidden Cup 5, we had deep dives on farming, right? Where people placed farms, how people chose to farm, how quickly people expanded those economies. That's because of the uniqueness from player to player, even during Hidden Cup at the very high level. I think
there's still going to be uniqueness in how people use this.
I think the game being hard is the reason the game is back where it is today. Listen, if people want an easy game, they're not going to come to Age of Empires 2.
I think there's a way to simplify. Like you cannot simplify it like that. the reason the game is where it is today is because it is hard. That is way too generalizing of the situation. Like, the game is such an amazing game. Hard or easy. It's the depth of the game, the civs, the historical aspect, the eco management, the micro, the fights and all. It's not because it's hard.
They're not going to play an RTS game at all. They're probably going to go.
It's an aspect of it, yeah, absolutely.
Or at least I don't think anyone's going to be discouraged by playing Age of Empires 2 and their experiences in the game because of farming. Yeah. This is taking a bit of a turn, but there are far more people being turned away from consistently playing this game by the mess of a lobby browser system we have right now. There's no proper way to sort it. It's looked the same way for 5 years. At times, 20% of the lobbies are players who are not even intending to play a game, but are just sitting in there to get Microsoft points. The ranked system in Age of Empires 2, you are thrown directly into it. When you lose your first initial games, you have massive elo drops, sometimes 30, 50, 60 elo. And it doesn't make it clear that you've got to play a certain amount of games to truly be ranked and that those are placement games. People just see massive drops in elo. And
I feel like you're saying that if you don't use it, then you'd be at a disadvantage. Somewhat proves a little of what he's saying. Auto reset probably doesn't put you at a disadvantage if you don't use it, for example. Of course it does. If you don't use auto resetting, you're going to have a lot of idle villagers. If you don't use shift queuing, you're going to have your villagers will get idle. Like, there's so many quality of life features that arguably you will be at a disadvantage if you don't use.
It's a hard game to play. The frequency in which you
I use auto reset, yeah,
and their ranked profiles where they have played under 10 games that just clearly stopped is way too high. And there are other games that have better ways to ease people into playing the game, whether that be unranked via a lobby or a ranked system, which has ways to ease them in and soften the blow. And don't even get me started on the lack of community features within the game.
He's obviously detouring a little bit away. Like, none of the issues he just presented has anything to do with auto farming or anything like that. Yeah.
In fact, you have to remake a party after every single time you complete a game, if you can even find friends within the game, because there's no proper friend system or proper way to add people or communicate with them in between games. So I get that people want features to make the game easier, to grow the game. And I understand that the heart is in the right place with a feature like this. But it bothers me that for a community that I feel is the best in online gaming, who's been speaking out about all these other things that would make it so much easier for them to continue to play this game and to enjoy this game, that we have a feature added, which I feel anyways, affects the flow of the actual gameplay instead of core things that so many online games have and Age of Empires 2 deserves. Now, there might be someone who's like, well, T90, why not both? Why can't we have this farm feature and then all those things? And I get that. Listen, my take is, man, the farm feature is too good and it's too easy. The farm feature as is going to make too big a dent in the time that players typically focus on their economy in key moments, and it will have an effect on the ebb and flow that Age of Empires 2 has been used to. It is, however, very satisfying. It's quite nice, and I think it would be nice for console players, for example, where it's already hard to perform many actions per minute. Single player, campaigns, lobby browser games, you could have that as a toggle, just like many other features, like turbo mode, for example, with the lobby browser. That way you could host the lobby and have that feature be on. Or if you're someone who didn't like that feature, you would have to have the feature. But in my opinion, when it comes to ranked, this is taking away creative control. And I think that creative control is important. And certainly when it comes to tournaments, I don't feel it's something that should be involved, which of course is quite tricky if that's just genuinely the way the game runs and there's no way to disable that. Okay, so in closing, I get where the devs are coming from. I feel it is going to influence high-level Age of Empires all the way down to the bottom. I feel it goes a little bit too far. I think Age of Empires is hard, but it has only survived because it's hard. And it has only survived because of the amount of actions that individuals have to do. And I think if the goal is to grow this game...
That's such a bold statement, though. Like, it only survived because it's hard.
And if the devs and any of you really care about growing this game more, there are critical things that need to be addressed with Age of Empires 2 beyond any farm features. And it has been far too long without them. So naturally, this week, I'm going to make a video talking about some of these things. And I hope you guys understand it's kind of an uncomfortable position for me, because being so opinionated and being so passionate about a topic that some people might not agree with, while it might get the clicks, it's not really an enjoyable experience for me. I want you guys to show up and just enjoy the video and have a good day, like and leave. I don't want you guys to second guess me because maybe I had a take that you disagreed with. But yeah, I want what's best for the game, and I want what's best for the community. And
there's no question about that.
The game deserves better. So anyways, I appreciate you guys hearing me out on this, whether you agree or disagree with me on it. And I'm going to publicly voice my concerns on things that I think Age of Empires 2 needs and deserves and has been lacking since DE has come out 5 years ago. I don't know exactly when that video will come out. Probably come out within the next week. We're working on it. And I don't know if I'll have these glasses on again. Sorry for just surprising you with the glasses here. My contact was bothering me. And yes, I do wear glasses sometimes. So anyways, I've gone on for too long about farms. Thank you guys very much for hearing me out. And I'll see you all in the next video.
All right. I disagree. Okay, so there's a lot of things to digest here. Okay, first of all, let's preface this by saying I understand completely where he's coming from, what he's thinking, what he's concerned about. I completely understand what his thought process is. However, I think him and others overestimate how much of an impact this has. Age of Empires 2 is hard. There's a lot of small tasks you need to do in Age of Empires 2. Placing farms is one of those tasks, or historically has been, and it will still continue to be, whether this feature is there or not. But it's not part of strategic decision-making or complexity within the game that should, in my opinion, have a serious impact on the game. It's part of the general macro aspect, of course, of eco-balance, putting the right villagers in the right resources, spreading them fast enough to the right resources. And of course, in that aspect, placing farms was also a part of that. You needed to spend a lot of actions in placing farms. Now, you still have to place a lot of farms around your town center in the start, like feudal age, early castle age, mid castle age, late castle age. You will still mostly place farms normally as you would now. It's only those situations where, like, okay, I want to build a mill and place 5 farms around the mill. You're going to use the auto farm feature. In late game, I have 15 villas on wood. I have floating 2,000 wood. I'm just going to grab 15 lumberjacks and build 2 mills and place auto farms around them. And you're going to save a couple of seconds there, which is, again, completely fine, in my opinion. I don't think it has any impact on the complexity of strategic decision-making, positioning, army control, anything that should have a serious impact on how the outcome of the game is. I'm going to show you some scenarios now where it's not good. Let's see. All right, I'm farming, right? Let's do like a regular... Oh, they're eating the farm immediately. Damn, come here. Okay. And we have like this and this and this. Okay. Let's imagine these villas, and I want to make farms with these 5 villas. Like this is like late feudal age, early castle. I want to make farm with these villas, right? I'll do this. I'll hold shift, right? See where they're placing the farms. These villagers will all go here. Watch how they behave. Watch how they behave. Right? Of course, now they spread out. But some of the farms that were placed were over here. Up here, up down there. If I was making those farms without this, I would have made them like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would have to run up here with vills. Of course, long term, that's a potential... it's still a better farm placement up here compared to there. But the vills walking distance from here to here, it makes more sense to take another vill from this area or a new produced vill to make there. Now imagine you want to you have vills here and you want to place around the farm. Sometimes the farm, suddenly like there's a farm there, next farm down there, next farm, look where it's coming, down here. There will be many situations where the villagers are on a different side and the efficiency and where you place the farm is actually worse than if you didn't use the auto farm. However, in the mid-late game where it's messy, you're floating resources, obviously I have 10 vills, I want to make farms, I'll do this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? This was now, I saved 2-3 seconds by doing it like this, rather than if I was doing it with the auto thing. How long do I need to do it manually? Like this. Of course, the farm placement is worse, and I spent 2-3 extra seconds on it. So, of course, it has an impact. But again, is this enough to the point where, oh, this has an impact on the complexity of the game, the difficulty of the game? This is what matters, you know? That's where my opinion is just completely off. Where it's like, I think this has such a limited impact on the outcome of a game. I understand what it means. It takes away uniqueness of placing farms, etc., etc. But I don't think it has any impact on what should matter in Age of Empires. What matters should be decision-making, economy balance, positioning on the map, using or microing your units. There's so much more and so many more important things that has an impact on a game, where this is down to the 0-point percentage, in my opinion. Which is why I think this feature is nice. I like using it myself as well in late game. And I think it's also nice for lesser players, no offense, where it's easier for you to make farms, it's quicker for you to make farms, and you can then focus more on things that, in my opinion, are also more fun. Placing farms, in my opinion, is not fun. Microing units is fun. Eco-balance is fun. Macro is fun, like producing units, trying to make the production going. Positioning your army control. Those things are fun. Placing farms, it's not fun, you know? Another thing I also pointed out was like the lobby system and all the other broken things in the game. I think if people think that this feature came on cost of anything else, I think that's also completely something people have to realize. Whoever made this feature of the devs probably has nothing to do with pathing, probably has nothing to do with the lobby system and so forth. There are different sections, whatever you call it, inside a development company, where, again, the fact that they made this probably had zero impact on their attempts to fix pathing or anything else, lobby system, whatever, all those things. But we can all agree that they definitely need to fix a lot of things about the game. But adding a feature like this, probably zero impact whatsoever in any other ways. Closing thoughts, auto fish boom. Then we're taking it too far. The fish boom has to be left untouched, okay? In the end, I think this feature is very insignificant to the overall game and gameplay. It's just a minor helpful tool that makes certain things easier and, of course, more efficient in many ways. But the actual impact it has on an outcome on a game, I think 0.1% of games are going to be decided, maybe less, are going to be decided by this feature. So in my opinion, it's completely fine. I think the feature is fine. I think it's good for newer players, and it's a welcoming tool for a player with lesser APM and people that want to play the game. New players in the game as well will also benefit from this. I don't think you're getting the point. Okay, MBL, what's the point? I think this feature, first of all, I don't think it's going to make anyone leave the game, and I don't think it's going to make anyone stay in the game. The feature has no impact whatsoever on the player base. And I also disagree with what T90 said earlier. Like, the reason the game is alive today is because it's hard. If this feature was there 10 years ago, it would have zero impact on whether the game is alive today or not, right? The point is that you're removing unique style of players' base and appearance. In low-level games, people will all have the same type of base with the same farms, making it very bland. At the same time, doing farms in high-stress situations won't let you be precise anymore, removes precision. I think it's stupid that everyone's going to have perfect farms. First of all, everyone is not going to have perfect farms. Secondly, like early game, at least at a certain elo and higher, everyone still will manually place farms before it becomes impactful. Secondly, is that something that is that important if someone is playing a game or watching a game? Like, how many times MBL are you casting or watching 800 elo players and focusing on their farms? How many people are sitting around watching 800 elo people's farms? I know T90 does like low elo legends and such, but is that like something you focus on? I guess it can be fun sometimes, the farm placements. I understand that. I like to watch bases after the game. Everyone scrolls over bases after the game, but I'm not sitting there, oh, nice farm placement, sir. GG, I really appreciate the way you farmed around that mill. Base layout for me is way more about like where you place your houses, archery ranges, positioning of buildings, your walls. Never have I once sat there and been like, ah, good job with the farm, sir. Again, I do completely understand that it takes away some unique aspects. Like, of course, a lot of people will have way similar farms, especially late game and those like mills placed around. I get it, I understand. But again, is that an important part of the game? It's not important for competitiveness. Maybe some people would prefer to see variety in farms. Maybe a lot of people would like to see variety in farms. But think about how many people play Age of Empires, right? 90% mostly play single player. They are going to love this feature. Let's auto-build bases too. Why? It takes away the uniqueness of the players, MBL. Come on. My point is it's not needed. It's not a need we had. We also didn't need multi-queue. We didn't need automatic reseeding. We didn't need... Like, there's so many things in the game that we didn't need, but we're thankful that we have. Can you imagine Hero Hustler spam now with 80 vills on perfect farms? Think of the poor enemy vills. Maybe more people can now do Hustler spam than Hera. Huh? Didn't think about that, eh? I think it removes the skills of multitasking when you have to fight and take care of your base. I disagree, because multitasking at higher elo, when you're fighting and taking care of your base, is not go back to your base and drop 5 farms with shift Q. It's micro archers, go back, drop 1 farm. Back to the army, micro archers, and you don't want to single drop farms or drop 2 farms when you're actively microing your army, right? This has, on a competitive level, in terms of high-level players, very little impact. Auto Mangnum microswitch shoots exactly where you move. That's called, but wait, we have ballistics in the game, MBL. Not for mangonels, but you're bringing up such stupid points. In what world would auto mangonel micro be fine? That's also what everyone has been saying, right? Micro should not be touched. The only decent argument against this is the concept that they might keep going with the automation, but you still have to take the time to select vills and to select make farms and such. I understand that. Again, if they add automatic production, automatic producing villagers, automatic producing cavalry, then I'm against it again. Then I'll be like, okay, guys, you're taking it too far. But I still again think this is such a tiny impact on the game that I don't think anyone should be concerned. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people will have a different opinion than me. But I think I got my point across, like at least my opinion. And I've seen a lot of people agree with me, and I think a lot of people agree with T90 as well. It's kind of one of those things where it's like in the middle. Some people hate it, some people don't mind, some people don't care, some people like it. It is what it is.